Mascot platformers. They were everywhere in the 1990s. Capitalizing off the success of Sonic the Hedgehog, lots of B and C grade developers tried copying what made Sonic special. With the exception of some games, most of these were terrible. It was during the midst of this mascot craze, 1992 to be precise, that Sony was working with Nintendo to create a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo to defeat Sega, who was absolutely dominating the video game market at the time. To make a long story short, Nintendo backstabbed Sony to work with Philips, which led to Sony getting infuriated, and Philips making these abominations.
It sure is boring around here.
My boy, this piece is what all true warriors strive for.
The add-on was eventually scrapped, and Sony decided to make a new console that was standalone, that wasn't an add-on, called the Sony PlayStation. The PlayStation was the first commercially successful CD console, and part of its success was the fact that it was geared to a more mature audience, and was cheaper than its competitor, the Sega Saturn. However, Nintendo was still in this equation and was preparing to unleash the Nintendo 64 the following year, and Nintendo was surely going to have a chokehold on that casual market. Enter Naughty Dog, a small developer located in Burbank, California, and after making a game called Way of the Warrior, which was a terrible Mortal Kombat clone, they were contacted by a higher-up at Universal Interactive Studios named Mark Cerny, who has previously worked on Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and The Ooze. He was somehow impressed by Way of the Warrior, but I mean, this man made Knack, so I'm not surprised that this game impressed him. He signs Naughty Dog on to make the Willy Wombat, the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. Cerny then contacted Sony, who decided to have exclusivity rights to this up-and-coming franchise. Crash Bandicoot 1 was a huge success, topping sales charts as soon as it released, and has sold 7 million copies to this very day. So, my history with this game is quite fascinating. I hadn't played this game until 2013. I had played Crash 2, Crash 3, Team Racing, Wrath of Cortex, Huge Adventure, Bash, Mind Over Mutant, and the DS version of Titans before this game. So when I first played this game, I hated it. I thought it was clunky, slow, and just not worth my time. But do I still think that 8 years later? Well, that's what you came here to find out. So let's start off with the plot of the game. Now, hold up. Before I keep you all waiting, yes, I am using the original 1996 PlayStation version of Crash Bandicoot and not the insane remake for this review. So, let's get a move on. Dr. Cortex and his assistant, Dr. Brio, both shunned by the scientific community, are on the verge of creating a mutant animal army to, you guessed it, take over the world. Dr. Cortex's mutant army only needs one more piece, and that's a general. And that's where Crash comes in. Dr. Nitrous Brio warns Cortex that the machine that they're sending Crash into isn't completed, and this experiment is more than likely to be a failure. It is, and Crash escapes with a mangled brain. That does not stop Cortex, however, as Cortex has abducted Crash's crush, Tana, I'm not a furry, but Bandicoot, and it's up to Crash to rescue her. So, pretty standard rescue the princess type story, but a game like this doesn't need a complex story, really. When it comes to gameplay, Crash is your standard get-to-the-end of the stage type platformer, similar to Donkey Kong Country, Sonic the Hedgehog, or Mario. Crash will have to deal with the island's wildlife and native inhabitants, along with Cortex's minions, in order to survive. Crash can't take more than one hit on his own, but luckily in specially marked boxes you can find an Aku Aku Spirit Mask, which grants Crash an extra hit, collect 3, and Crash becomes invincible for a limited amount of time. Crash also can't die too many times, or he gets a game over. Thing is, you probably won't be seeing a game over screen till the latter half of the game, as extra lives and Wumpa Fruit are plastered everywhere. Most levels you control Crash on foot, but in a select few levels, Crash commits Grand Theft Hog and rides a wild pig. And these levels are alright, I guess. There are a select few levels where instead of doing 2D or 3D platforming, Crash runs towards the camera and he gets chased by a boulder. These levels are not only super tense, but they're super fun. When it comes to control, Crash 1 is a bit of a mixed bag. Other than jumping, the only other means of defense that Crash has is a spin attack that he can use to break open boxes or spin into enemies, which feels oh so satisfying. Crash mostly feels fine to control, but he doesn't stop on a dime when letting go of the directional pad. He carries a little bit of momentum, and this can unfortunately lead to some unfair deaths. Speaking of deaths, you know how I know that this is a mid-90s platformer? It has a stupid save system. So to save the game, you need to break every box in the level. Sounds simple enough, but after you break the first checkpoint crate, you can't afford to die once, so you're potentially throwing out tons of progress. Not only that, but sometimes you have to go against the camera to collect any remaining or missing crates, which is super annoying because the camera doesn't pull back far enough, which leads to unfortunate deaths. The only other way to save is by collecting 3 Taunt heads and completing the fun, albeit pretty easy bonus stages. While the main levels are quite hard, the bosses are anything but. Papu Papu is easily one of the easiest bosses I've ever faced in a video game. Ripperoo is tricky, but not that hard. Koala Kong is quite forgettable. Pinstripe is actually quite fun, but still relatively easy. He's got the best personality out of all the bosses. Nitrous Brio is the only hard boss in the game, but that's only due to weird hitboxes, and Cortex, while still being pretty easy, is actually pretty epic and fun. Back to the positives. The atmosphere in this game is so good. Right from level 1 you can see Cortex Castle looming in the distance, getting bigger as the game progresses. And the castle burning down in the final level is just epic. I also love the level design. It's not the best I've seen in a 3D platformer, but for a relatively small and new studio at the time, the level design is pretty solid. My favorite level by far is Temple Ruins. It's hard as hell, but solid all the same. Some other great levels are Boulders, Generator Room, and as hard as it is, Slippery Climb is fantastic. I also love Crash Bandicoot's music. It can go from serene and calm to dark and threatening. All the tracks are pretty solid. I also love how the levels get more man-made as time goes on. You start off in natural jungles on the first island, to temples on the second, and eventually waste factories on the third. Out of all the games, this one definitely has the best sense of progression. Can I just gush about the graphics for a second? This game came out on the PlayStation in 1996 and could easily pass as an early Dreamcast or PS2 game. This game is really pretty, from the vibrant colors of the jungles to the shimmering water of the rivers to the cold exterior of Cortex Castle. This game is beautiful. So, is Crash Bandicoot worth it in 2021? Maybe. I'd definitely play the Insane remake as that one has a proper save system, but nonetheless, this game is still pretty solid. I'm gonna give Crash Bandicoot 1 a B. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked what you see here and you wish to see more, don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel, click the like, and tap the bell to stay up to date with all new TheRekounasShow content. Thanks for watching.